Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron. I want to welcome you here. And if you're in the here and now, you're also welcome. Thank you for taking time from your valuable life to join me. Today, I have two guests with me, Amira, who's with the Near Death Experience Institute, and Doug, my friend from New Jersey, Doug Auld. And we're going to be talking about a book called The Beings. And this is getting into what I say is the most important part of the whole UFO mystery, and that is, what are we actually dealing with here? I think Doug, I think you and I have someone in common. I asked Dan Smith about this. I said, did this, it was actually written by high level intelligence. And it said, because we cannot control the phenomena, we watch those that the phenomena influences. Lights in the sky have no meaningful information. And there may be beings, however defined. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the intelligence behind this phenomena and what it might be. So I want to welcome Doug and Amira here, and let's get going on. Maybe Amir, you can start with what was the idea behind this book, and why is it important for people, in your opinion, to pay attention to all these stories from various experiencers who have had encounters with whatever the intelligence is behind the UFO phenomena?
Hi, thanks for having us, Grant. So, this book actually began with the first book that I had put together called Death. It was about near death experiences. And many of the experiences said that they also had either ET contact or some ET type experiences or encounters. And so that's where the idea actually came from, where maybe it was important to have another book where we talked about the beings in more detail. And we talked not only about, like you say, the lights in the sky and the phenomena and people witnessing different UFOs and that type of thing, but also about the specific beings. What type of beings are they? Are they visible? Can we see them? Can we hear them? Are they communicating with us? And as you know, I've been putting this book together. It was very interesting for me because I've learned more, obviously, now than I knew before. But it's not only that there are different types of beings, but each of these different beings have a different role and a different purpose, not just for helping humanity and the story of humanity, but also in the bigger purpose of things when you're talking about galactic federations and things like that. So there's a lot of things happening that we don't know about, that are happening behind the scenes, that are important for our growth as humanity, for our evolution of consciousness, for our spiritual growth as humans. And I'm very excited to be a part of it.
Beautiful. Just a little heads up. I don't know if you realize this. I didn't realize this till maybe a week or two ago. This high-level official, former CIA official, Jim Semivan, who had beings in his room in 1992, 1993, stated that he and his wife had met with Eben Alexander, who has done probably one of the most famous near-death experience books in history. And he confirmed to her that there was actually alien encounters in his near-death experience, and the publisher told him to pull it. So this is this crossover that I think people have also missed, is that there's, if you start looking at all the different paranormal phenomena, whether it's ghosts or near-death experiences or orbs or stuff, they all cross over. It seems to be part of the same phenomena, appearing in different sort of different perspectives. And maybe in your next book, I can link you up with Barbara Streisand's stepson, who is a full-blown experiencer. And what he described was, what he was told is, when they come into the world, they look in your head to see what's in your head, and it is that they build a lesson around. Is what they can't do anything else. You have certain belief systems and certain ideas, and they work around that in order to move you along the path. So a wonderful idea to put this together. And the more I look at it, the more upset I become with the UFO community. I actually say that in the UFO community, the experiencers are actually the illegal immigrants of the UFO world. They're basically, it basically comes down to, if you start talking about your encounters and stuff like that, you got to sort of look behind you and be careful someone's not sneaking up on you with a cross and nails, because they just hate it. I mean, people want to do the boys and their toys, the technology. Let's get the technology. Let's get this kind of stuff. And the experiencers are sort of left on the sidelines. and are not really allowed to speak. So thank you for giving them a voice. Now to my friend Doug, who's got his hockey shirt on. Welcome,
Yes.
Doug, and thank you for all you've done for the UFO world and from your artistic background. And tell me how you got involved with this project and a little bit about your experience in terms of how you got dragged into this UFO rabbit hole.
All right. I began watching near-death experiences about 4 years ago. I'm guessing 4 or so years ago, after studying UFOs for a very long time, and that's of course how we met. Grant, we met when Chris Bledsoe actually told me about a UFO event in New Jersey, and I came out and I met you there, and we've become friends ever since. And I think a little bit of our hockey bond has helped us. you
Yeah.
know But anyway, so about 4 years ago, I started watching the Jeff Mara show, and and they really, and I tell people this in all my interviews, that the near-death experiences um, helped take away this frantic feeling I had about life, and they brought me out of depression. I was in deep depression. I was seeing just dead ends everywhere I turned, and if you don't have any feeling that life extends, and if you actually believe that life ends when you end, then that's sort of analogous to like walking towards a cliff, and you're and the by the time you get to the edge, you have no choice, your age, and then you fall over and you're gone forever. And I used to, in a way, think that, regardless of my Catholic upbringing, I used to feel like anxiety about, is this all there is, and like where's this going? So once I started watching the NDEs, and I really, really, I mean, after watching 200 of them, you're like, oh my God, this is not a coincidence. It's not some little brain chemical in the head that just goes off and makes you believe in this. These testimonies are real. The Ibn Alexander testimony is fantastic. The ones where people leave their body on an operating table, go up on the ceiling, and then they can tell the doctor where he dropped his pen, underneath the operating table. There are things like this that really bring you in and go, wow. And so if we're not a body and we're a spirit, and our body just gets dropped off and is over, then we extend. And so it's not so much the fear of death anymore. Then it's just really a matter of the fear of how I'm going to die, which is something that ends up resonating. So I reached out to a woman named Elle on Jeff's program, Elle Saramaga, who I think you and I have spoken with. And Elle told me all about this book that Amira was doing. So that's how I met Amira, and I started to like interact with Amira about, hey, at first I didn't think I fit the book. I'm not so much as an experiencer in the way that many of the other authors in the book are, but I'm a UFO spotter. I like have a great track record of spotting things in the sky, mainly because I tell people I look up. I don't walk with my head down, and I have a curiosity, a deep curiosity about that we're not alone. I've had this curiosity since a child. So that's how it began. I started to, I was recording all my UFOs when I would go to Mexico or here. I had night vision equipment, and I've always been fascinated with it. And then when it all just seemed to come together, when Amira and I started talking, and I got offered the idea of being one of the authors in the book, and that's when I offered my Hypnota image, because Amira and I, we were talking about, well, what would be a great cover for the book? And we didn't want to make it some sort of new agey, um, you know, AI kind of thing. And so there's something about the image that I used for my play Hypnota, my musical, that I also thought fit the book. I offered it to Amira and she agreed. So that's how I started this.
Have you got the image? Can you pull it up and then we can maybe get to the book and
Yeah, I've got the image.
okay.
Let
Yeah.
me see if I
So
can
so let's go
share.
through it, and as we look at the book, Doug, you can tell the story behind because it's kind of a unique image that I had seen a long time ago. You'd already shown me this
Yeah.
before it came up. And then Mary, you can maybe talk about who's in the book, because I think I'm sort of like Doug. I mean, I get messages and stuff like that, but I haven't had like a face-to-face encounter. I had, very dramatic UFO encounters back in the 1970s, and went down the rabbit hole and sort of gave up my life to do this. But maybe as you're showing the image, describe the type of people that you assembled for the book, and what they represent.
Okay, so I shared the image in the chat. Can you see that? Can you?
Oh,
Is it possible, or do you need me to share my screen?
Probably easier to share the screen. Hang on, let's see if I can pull it up here.
Okay.
Hang on. Can you see? Oh, I'm not sharing screen though. You're sharing screen,
Okay.
so I can't show it to you. You can pop it up because I can't. I'm not sharing screen. Are you
Okay,
sharing
it says
screen?
that
No,
only
Amira
you
has-
can share the screen because you're the host.
Oh, so
Okay, hang on. Let me share screen then.
Okay.
Share screen.
got a green button on the very bottom when you go with the cursor. You'll go
Okay.
right over and it says share. It's lighting up for me. Let me see the chat. I see it in the chat on the side, but I don't think that's going to
Okay.
be.
Can you see the
There
image
we
now?
go.
Yeah,
There it is. Yeah.
great.
Okay, so
It's beautiful.
Doug, maybe explain the image. Where what the idea is. This got connected to Chris? Is that where when you did it, when we had these encounters with Chris?
Yeah. No, it isn't. Oddly enough, it was a very quick and spontaneous prompt, if I may use that word. It's almost like I wanted to make this image probably towards the idea when I was writing my musical Hypnota, which is the idea is to bring a soft disclosure to a theater going audience, not the movies. We've seen many UFO um movies and special effects and everything. I wanted to go backwards, almost like to the time of radio, where I was like going to make something that people could come and there'd be costuming and it would be acted out and so on. And I got this idea to create this image, and you can almost see the sweep of my hand because I took paper towel and paint and went like this all over the paper. It was canvas paper. And then I rubbed out the image in the middle. I didn't want it to be a specific image. I didn't want it to have a specific face. And I wanted it to be some sort of combination of an ET being, but also a spirit or angelic being. And then the real thing that puts it into a curiosity is the hats, because the hats came from instinctually. I put them in there because I wanted to kind of hearken a time in the past, because this is not a new phenomenon. This is not something just happening now. This is something that's going on for ages. And the hats kind of fit the bill of almost like a 50s sci-fi movie when everyone had a hat on, and that The Day the Earth Stood Still, or any number of those movies, always had those images of men in hats that kind of like gave me this feeling that fit this image of they're all looking, they're all seeing, they're all witnessing this, but it's not from 2024. It harkens back, and so that it was an instinctual image that I made, and then I used it for the my musical Hypnota. So that's on my Hypnota site, on my website. I use that image, but then Amira and I looked at it and I said, this would be great. It's not bound to one thing. This would be great to use for the book. So Amira decided to do so.
It's interesting because when you mentioned hats from the 50s, I've never looked really that close at the hats. It always seemed to me it was like a biblical thing, like people
Yeah.
in the Bible looking at some sort of divine being. But you mentioned the 50 hats, so you can almost have different interpretations of the image, and this whole idea of the being not having a specific face. You and I both work with Nancy Tremaine, and that's the sort of the subject of your um, um,
Musical.
musical. And I remember asking her because hers was reptilian, and I said, "Well, did you see him? Was he reptilian on the ship in 1961?" She said, "No." I said, "What did he look like then?" She said, "Oh, he was a human being. He had dark hair. He was sitting at a panel board." And I go, "Really? So what's he? Is he now reptilian?" She says, no, he just sort of comes to me now. It's like an etheric being now. And it's sort of like the being that she had kept changing. And so that I think is an important concept of this idea that I'm actually doing a lecture where I'm going to show quickly 360 different descriptions of beings on sort of on pages of a book, and all the beings are different. Everybody's describing something different, and that's this idea that we may be part of what we're actually looking at. That we are, as Seth said, you manifest everything around you. There is no other rule. So, very interesting, very inspiring to see your image. It means a lot. As soon as I saw it, I went, "Oh yeah, I remember this image," and it's just
You know what I add to this, Grant, not to interrupt, I add to
yeah,
this that it also encompasses things like Fatima, like religion,
yeah,
like different kinds of. And so if I became too specific with whether it's an alien gray or whether it's a reptilian, yes, Nancy Tremaine and I became friends while she was writing her books. I was working on my show, and we'd be sharing things back and forth, and we can speak about that a little bit. But then getting back to the image, it just had to be a spirit. I call it spirit angel. That's what the image I titled it as, and just had to represent the others, whatever others that you wanted to add, be it religious, be it historic, be it alien, be it dreamscape, or any number of things. And that's why I think we landed on a good usage for the book, The Beings, because if it's, you put a picture of some other kind of being that's become into our lore that we tend to think is the one right one, it's not a good idea.
yeah. Interesting. I see you got one of the authors is Philip Kinsella, and he has an experience that I've only picked up, but like I sort of learn as I go along here that these sort of ideas come to me. He's one of the people who had the beings behind him, and he wasn't allowed to look, and they sort of, I don't know if that's part of the story, but they sort of threw him off. And then when I saw Jim Semivan giving an interview where they were asking about the beings in the room, he was asked, and he said, "Well, I really don't want to talk about it," and they're still investigating and stuff like that. And then they said, "Well, was there any telepathy?" And he said, "That was the most interesting part." He said there was actually there was this being standing behind me. I don't know if it was a reptilian or a tall gray or a mantid, but it had this guardian type thing going on about it. And it's like, "Oh, my guardian!" And then he knows about Michael Newton, and this is his idea that when you leave the world, you go in front of a council between 3 and 12 people, and your guardian angel stands behind you on the left hand side. So of course I asked the interviewer, I said, "Ask Jim, is it on the right side or the left side?" And Philip Kinsella talks about this as well, that the beings are behind him and he's not allowed to look. And then you start thinking, is this like a spirit guide? And I had written this book on people who flew the ship, and people were talking about this. There was a U.S. Air Force retired colonel out of Los Angeles told the story about this somebody behind him. He didn't know who it was, and they were telling him what to do. And I'm going, well, what's really going on here? And so I actually started asking around. I actually asked Whitley Strieber. I said, "Whitley, you're on the ship. Do you ever have anybody behind you that was telling you what to do?" And he said, "All the time." And so this idea that it may be like a spiritual thing, and that's what Chris says. That Chris says he doesn't believe this is ET at all. This is some sort of spiritual phenomena that's masking itself, as alien. So fascinating. So, um, Amira, can you talk a little bit again about the people that you put together in this book, and what kind of stories people will be looking forward to seeing here?
Yeah, so as you know, Philip Kinsella contributed a chapter, and in his chapter, he talks about a specific experience with his brother and a friend of his, where they were out in the woods and they were looking for ships and ETs, and he had a wonderful experience there that he shares in the book. He's had many experiences, but he shared that specific one in the chapter he wrote. And there are many different authors from many different backgrounds with many different beings that they either encountered or have experiences with. One that is really exciting is a chapter by Heidi. So Heidi has had experiences for many years, and she actually works with extra-dimensional, higher-dimensional beings to heal people from different types of diseases and illnesses. And she's actually healed people from things such as cancer, multiple people. She's healed with the help of these beings. There's someone else who wrote a chapter. Her name is Michelle, And Michelle talks about her personal experiences dealing with lots and lots of trauma in her life, extreme amounts of trauma, and her beings, we'll just call them her beings for now, helped her deal with that trauma and integrate that trauma and, help others because of it. So, and there's lots of other interesting stories. Vincent wrote an amazing chapter as well. He has been in contact with beings from, I think it's called the Galactic Federation of Light. And what they do is they are basically protectors, and they help many people in different, not just Earth and not just humans, but many different beings also. And he specifically and particularly protects people from reptilians who are doing not so good things to humans. So he helps them with that. And that is wonderful and amazing, because a lot of people that are being affected by negative type beings are younger people and children and people who are, vulnerable to this type of energy affecting them. And so he's kind of like a protector and a helper and a clearer of sorts. Oh my goodness, there's so many chapters. There's another one, very interesting, by what is her name? Jamie. So Jamie is actually a hybrid, and she has a blend of human DNA and beings DNA. We'll call them ET DNA, whatever you want to call it. And she, like many others who identify as hybrids, they have specific roles and specific purposes that they need to fulfill. Also in the light of awakening humans, helping humans, spiritual growth for humans, evolution for humans. So amazing, wonderful people have contributed from all around the world. We have someone in Austria, her name's Alexandra, and she has contact with water beings, and she is actually a scientist. So it's interesting to have her perspective, because she's not the typical person someone would envision. If they think about someone who is encountering or communicating with beings, you think a woo-woo type person, right? And I say that with respect, because I'm one of them. But
Yes.
so Alexandra, she's actually a scientist. She comes from a scientific background, and here she's having these amazing experiences, and she's learning from them and using the information she's learning to teach others and share with others and make these connections that we are struggling to make, in terms of where does science end and where does spirituality begin, and where can we blend the two. So there is so many different exciting stories and experiences and encounters that not only open up the mind, but they help people to understand what is actually going on. Because one of the intentions of this book was to give people correct information. We live in an information age. Everything is available on the internet, and unfortunately with that comes a lot of misinterpretation, misunderstandings, misinformation. And so one of the things I wanted to do is make sure that all the information that was in this book was with an intention of upliftment and, helping people feel empowered. It doesn't matter what their type of experience might be, there's a place for it. Some people have negative experiences, and that's okay. Like Laura. So Laura used to be a school teacher, and one day her daughter came to her 6-year-old, and she said that they are, bad guys, bad type beings that are threatening her. And Laura then decided to, and you could read about it in the book, but Laura then decided to leave leave her job as a public school teacher and start studying about this so she could protect her family and her kid. And so she now helps people to remove negative type entities that are either attaching or attacking people. And that wouldn't have come if she didn't experience that negative type situation. So there's a lot of interesting things and a lot of exciting things. And I think all of the chapters are so different, but they come together in such a beautiful way, because everyone's experience is so different. Yet the underlying truth of it all is that we are all part of it, Like Doug was saying earlier, near-death experiences was something that really resonated with him. And it's the same for me. When my grandfather died 10 years ago, I was completely overcome with a lot of negative emotions. I was very depressed. I was extremely anxious. I could not sleep for days. I kept thinking, extremely negative thoughts, and then the negative thoughts kind of snowballed into who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here? Where did my grandfather go? Is he in heaven? Is he in hell? Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Like all of these questions just started coming out. And I never found as much comfort as I did in a near-death experience book. So the first book that I ever picked up, or the first bit of information that I came to or that I found that helped me, was a near-death experience book. And since then, I've been hooked on it, because like near-death experiences and this book, every story is different, yet it is not different. They all have the same underlying story of, well, there is a God, there is a bigger purpose, you are existing for a reason, you are part of all that is, just as everyone else is. If you did not exist, then all that is wouldn't be all that is, because you were no longer part of it. So it's so that's where it all started for me. And when I look back on where we are now, I can see how this is also just a continuation of that. Because once you understand that, okay, so God does exist and all of this does exist and it is real, the good and the bad of it, then how do the beings fit into it? There are positive beings, there are negative beings. These beings have a consciousness, they have their own agendas, they have their own evolution, they have their own spirituality. And how do we as humans fit into that picture? Some of them are here to assist us and help us, and some of them are not here to assist us and help us. So it's about discernment, it's about information, and it's about preparing ourselves, because now that people are identifying, okay, I see the evidence, I see, the UFOs, here are some evidences of ET existence and all of this. Once we move beyond that, it's only natural that the ET beings will come here and they will say, hi, here I am. You've been looking for me, or whatever it may be. And we need to be prepared for that. So if we are going to approach it with fear, it's not going to be a good experience for us. We need to approach it with an open-mindedness, with I want to say the right amount of caution, because there needs to be discernment of some sort, but also we need to be prepared for what is beyond that. Once we make contact with ETs and they are here amongst us, because they already are, we're just not aware of it all the time. But then what does that mean for humanity? What does that mean for what we believe in and what we've been taught to believe, and every other thing that goes on in society and what the government tells us and all of this? So everything will be changing. And so we need to be prepared for that.
Are you an experiencer? And let me get into your experience, because everybody has a little story when you get into the background as to how they got in and they can't stop doing it. And it's like an addiction, and it's hard to keep a relationship together. So talk a little bit about your own story.
Funny enough, I've never had an experience. I've never had a near-death experience, and I never had an ET experience up until I started this book, actually. When I started this book, I found myself amidst an experience where I didn't even know it was an experience until one of the other authors, actually multiple of the other authors, had told me this is what's going on. So a lot of weird things started happening when this book started getting in motion and we started making progress. One of the things is we had a huge storm in our area, and my roof got flooded and all the water came in and my house got flooded, right? So I was displaced immediately. And then I started getting sick a lot. And, a very weird amount of sick. Like every 2 weeks I was sick, which is so weird because I usually get sick maybe a couple times a year when the seasons change. So it was very odd for me. And then my brother's son, who is 5 years old, was in the hospital. He was unconscious. He was not responsive. He was on life support. There were lots of weird experiences happening. And until I dove deeper into it, one of many people brought to my attention that this was actually some kind of attack by reptilians because of this book and because of the ripple effects it will have in future. I don't know what those are, and because of my involvement with it. So all of that things that were happening to me personally was a way of disrupting me, a way of getting me unstable so that I wouldn't be able to work on the book, or that I would postpone it, or whatever it may be. And so I had to learn how to defend myself. I had to learn how to understand these things, because up until that point, these things never happened to me. I never have experiences like that. That's not me. You have experiences, that's fine, but it's not me until now. So that was my experience, not the best one for the first one, but it is
Can
what it is.
Now
can I?
go ahead, Doug.
Oh no. Do you want to say something, Grant? I just wanted to add something to this
Yeah,
whole
go
thing.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to speak in light for the people that don't have any experiences, and the people that will come across this book or this topic that are like, what are you people talking about? Like, I go to work, I come home, I watch TV, I do the same thing. And I'm not making value judgments or minimizing anything, but there are a lot of people that do not have any of these experiences. And I liken it to the people who say, I don't dream. There are a lot of people that say, no, I never dream. I never dream. Is it that they never dream, or they never remember their dreams? So there's a very, very big difference. And I've been tapping into some of the most amazing dreams recently. But I just wanted to say that there are, like, what I learned from reading near-death experiences is that, for example, there was an older gentleman who drowned, and Andy Petro, his name was, amazing NDE on Jeff Mara. And he drowned, and he was like in his 20s when he drowned, and he went to the bottom of the water, and he realized he's going to die, and he's like, oh my God. And something started talking to him, and it was intuitive. It was not like hearing it in his ear, but it was hearing it in his head. And it said, Andy, relax, let go, relax. He's like, I can't. He's like, I can't let go. I'm gonna drown. Andy, relax. Now, I don't want to tell the whole story, but the idea is that a lot of us are kind of anesthetized to more subtle messages. I would say that I have been one of those for many, many years. And I started to learn that it's not just talking in my head that I'm making up. There are subtle messages that come to me that move me in certain directions, but it's a matter of hearing them. It's the same thing as it's a matter of remembering a dream to know that you had a dream. Otherwise, you will think you didn't. So I just wanted to say, in behalf of all the listeners or people out there that think this is nuts stuff, and I don't blame them, because I mean, I'm probably, and I think Amira knows this, in the book, my chapter is probably the least so-called woo-woo, which is our funny little word for it. Mine is the one that's probably, solidified with documentation and some photographs. Nothing's that wild. Nothing's that crazy. I'm not showing crazy UFOs like Billy Meyer or any number of things like flying saucers, but I am showing objects and things that don't make any sense. And so therefore they're unidentified, they're in the air, they're an unidentified flying object. And that's how I've approached my chapter, with what you and I, Grant, would be calling more the nuts and bolts end of it. But there's a lot of stuff I'm going to learn when I read this book of the other writers in the chapter that's really out there. Last thing I'll say is, when you think about the woman who's doing the work on the water beings, all right? Grant, we all know about that Japanese scientist who studied snowflakes and water and positive energy into them, and that they actually change. Our thought changes their makeup, the way they show themselves, snowflakes and everything. So we are interactive in everything. And I think one of the near-death experience people said, if it was one thing I wanted to give everyone to take away with, it's God is in everything. Absolutely everything, from stones and rocks and bricks and garbage and crap on the street to the highest of high that you want to think about. There is a vibrational, amazing quality to everything. I wanted to add that.
Yeah, interesting. The way I look at some of this is this idea that we want to sort of convince everybody that this is real or whatever. And I think what we have to sort of look at it as, we're dropping our little glass of water into the ocean. That 80 years ago, if you'd mentioned extraterrestrials, UFOs, people would know what you're talking about. Near-death experiences only started in 1975. Like the first book came out in 1975. And it's like Max Planck said, you do not convince your opponent you're right by convincing him he's wrong. Science advances one funeral at a time. They die out, and the new generation is not offended with the idea. And what we're doing is, in the end, you may not convince, you may convince one or two people, but everybody now knows what a near-death experience is. They may not believe in it, but everybody knows what it is. Everybody knows what Skinwalker Ranch is. Everybody knows what Area 51 is. Everybody knows what a UFO is. And that's the thing. It's this idea. And then you go to the young people and they go, yeah, that's real. They're not offended by this. And so consciousness rises little bit, and we really don't realize that things are actually changing. We think it's always the same, but in we're doing our little part, which is the question I want to ask Amira. You mentioned this thing as to your experience in doing this. A lot of times when we have the experiencer, I'll always ask the experiencer. I'll say, "So, you think you got a mission?" And they go, "Yeah, I don't know. I think so, but I don't know what it is." Or, "Yeah, it is. And here's what's my mission is." So my question to you is, do you think if reincarnation is a fact, and if this, it's some stuff like Michael Newton stuff is a fact, that we plan our lives before, did you and I and Doug have a meeting before we were born and we decided we were going to do this and we were going to put this out? Is your book part of your mission?
I wish I don't know. I would love to say yes, it is. I don't know that for a fact, but the fact that we're sitting and talking about it, I think that it is. I think that I don't believe in coincidences. I think that everything happens for a reason and there's a purpose behind everything. And I think that each of us have our own personal intentions for doing good in the world. And this is just another manifestation of that. I think that whether we have purposes or missions or whatever you want to call it, I think they will change throughout our lives. I think they'll evolve as we do. And I think the best we can do is just put our intentions forward for what we wish to do for humanity and for the greater good of humanity, and allow the synchronicities to just take place and allow those things to happen. I don't really, bother myself with, oh, is this part of my mission or my purpose or this or that? The fact that I'm alive and I'm living here on earth and I'm doing work that is actually helping people, even if it's just one person, then I consider that to be a successful life. And so I'm happy with whatever else it may be, whether I speak to you, whether I speak to someone else, whether I put out another book or another 100 books, it doesn't matter. I feel like everyone has something that they need to offer. And as long as we're doing that with the purest, most loving intentions, I think it will have a good effect on everyone.
Beautiful. Well said. You're from South Africa, correct?
Yes, I am.
And you mentioned somebody, I think, from Austria, or and I'm from Canada, and Doug is down there at the center of the universe outside of New York City.
Okay.
You have people around the world. Is there a sort of a pattern that you saw in terms of, I don't know if you had anybody from China or some of these sort of remote places, or is there a difference in how people see the phenomena depending upon where you live in the world?
Yeah, so we have someone who's also in Singapore. We have someone who is in New Zealand, but she was actually born and raised in South Africa as well. And honestly, I don't really see a difference in how they view the beings or how they interact with them. I think, if anything, they find a commonality and a common ground in the fact that they all, have experiences with different beings. And interestingly enough, there were 4 different people in our group when we would have our weekly group catch-up calls with all of the authors. We would explain and we would share different experiences and stories. And it came out that 4 different people, 2 had contact with the same being. So, and they didn't know each other. They had met when we collaborated on this book. They later found out that they actually have contact and experiences with the same being. So that was very interesting to see that beings also choose particular people to have contact with, and they were on opposite sides of the world. Again, they knew nothing of each other. We came together to do this book, and they were explaining, oh, I have contact or experiences with this type of being, and this is what she looks like, and this is, all the things. And the other one would say, me too, this is my experience. And they would be like, wow, this is the same being. So that was very interesting as well.
One of the things I ask experiencers, maybe you can, because you've got a lot of different experiences there, is I find that everybody seems to be talking to one particular being. They're dealing with a lot of beings, but one particular being who has a name. Have you experienced that where the being has a name and it sort of directs the person and tells them what's going on and stuff like that?
Yes, there are many of those cases in the book. Actually, I think if not all of them, there are just a few chapters that are not particularly being related. Like Doug's chapter, he doesn't speak about any particular being, but others they do. They mention them by name. There are some images and drawings and paintings of the beings and how they manifest to the channel. So there's a lot of messages that are channeled by the beings for this particular book or for the chapter that the author was working on. So there's that. And there's also different types of beings. So there are beings from, Pleiadian type beings, there are blue avian type beings, water beings, I forget the name for that. But there's different types as well with their own particular names, where they come from, what their mission and purpose is, all of those things as well.
And
You know,
why do you think that is? Go ahead, Doug.
yeah, I just wanted to add, there is in my chapter a being called Chandra, and I had this Chandra event. Now it's below my UFO events, and I think Grant, you may have known about this. I know Amira, you know, and that was an event that was happening within my own home, up in my bedroom when I would sleep at night, and I had this sense that something is coming into my room, and I had it going over and over and over again until it manifested itself to be behind me. Sounds crazy. Behind me, holding my wrists, and I was frozen, frightened. And I remember having a conversation with it, and that conversation is in the book. But
Yes, I remember that. I
yes,
actually read that this afternoon. I remember that. And you were still saying to the being, "Oh, you're so beautiful." And the being said, "I know." I remember that.
it was such an odd interaction. But when I said you're very beautiful and it gave me its name, that's when it dissipated. It just disappeared. Everything let go. The tension in the room let go, the feeling of cold chill let go, and something came over me because I had asked it. Someone would have to read the book to get the whole story. Every 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 bit of it, when it was over, told me it will never return. This is a finished event. This is a finished thing. Now, was it a being that was caught in between dimension, a discarnate being, or something that was like looking for approval or letting, or it needed to be let go of by me? I don't know, but it was a riveting experience. And once it was done, it was done. And I was like, well, wow, that will never happen again. It never has. I've never had that feeling up in my loft again. So there is that one. The other one was that painting, Grant, that you've seen where I made that painting of that vision when I was in Mexico that came into me while awake and dissipated, and I created the painting for the book. But both these stories are in my chapter.
James Lukatsky, who is the sort of the guy who ran the DIA program, describes a story in 2011. He's with Senator Reid and somebody from the executive branch, and they're talking about the fact that they had a craft. They actually have recovered a craft, and they'd been inside the craft. And then Lukatsky says, and there was no engine. And then he says, "So what are we dealing with here? Let me have your opinion, both of you. What are we actually dealing? What's this all about?"
If I may go, I would
Yeah,
say this reminds me of David Adair. Do you know the name David
yeah, yeah,
Adair?
oh, yeah.
So he got I think it was Curtis LeMay at the time, but was asked to get on top of this engine.
Yeah.
And I never forget, it was so riveting. He got on it, and his hands and his being, his body changed like a chameleon shapes and colors on the skin of the engine. So I bring that up for this reason, that I think we're dealing with a consciousness, a something we call a craft, because we have a hard time talking about things not of matter. We talk of, matter, metal, this, that, everything else, wood, and then we talk spirit. But my impression is that This is somewhere in between. It's like an object that's also got a consciousness. And so you will it if you knew how to work it. You will it to what you're doing. So it crosses over into NDEs. This is where NDE, UFO, and everything come together. Everything in my crossover. Amira, what would you say?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I actually remember listening to a channeling of an ET type being, and the being was explaining, someone had asked the question of how do their spacecrafts work? How does it move so quickly, and how does it go from place to place in a matter of seconds? And they were asking lots of different type of questions about the hardware of it. What is the material made out of, and that kind of thing. And something that I actually remember, there was a lot of information, but what I can remember right now is that the being was saying that their craft and their technology is actually an extension of consciousness. It's an extension of their own consciousness. So it's not so much something that is just external of them. It is a manifestation of their own consciousness that has a consciousness of its own. It can do things, and it can think things, and it can perceive things on its own, as well as in connection with the entity that is operating it. And together they can create things, they can do things, they can move, they can do different things that they need to do because of that. I don't know what you would call it, but it reminds me of, I don't know if you watched this movie called Pacific Rim, where they have this neural connection that the pilot needs to make with the other pilot before they can fight in the Jaeger. It reminded me of that, where there is a neural link and a connection between the consciousness of the two things, whether it be the entity operating the vehicle and then the vehicle itself, and together they do what the intention is. So I don't know if that is maybe something connected, but it could be.
Grant, do you remember the great 1954 movie Forbidden Planet, written by Ray Bradbury? Okay, where I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's one of my favorite sci-fi films of all time, where they talk in 1954. In this movie, they talked about the monsters of the id, monsters of the subconscious, and they travel to a planet where this is very advanced, and there's a like a astronaut from Earth who traveled to the planet like 20 years ago, and he stayed there, and he's shipwrecked, and they come to rescue him, and he doesn't want any rescue. He's got this life among the Krell. It's called the Krell. The being's called the Krell, and in that, they're so advanced that they teleport everything. Everything is mental. Everything is sent here. Any kind of housing or thing, or everything is fixed, and all disease is wiped out. There is no such thing through their mind. The thing that wipes them out, that's why I love the movie. The thing that wipes them out in one night is what's called monsters of the id, deep hatred of their eternal self-conscious that creates a monster from that deep suppressed, evil. And it wipes them out in one night. And that's what the movie's about. It's called Forbidden Planet. One of the things that really made an impression on me in growing up.
Wow, fascinating. Now, we're talking about the connection, and the publishing that we do is called It's All Connected. And one of the things that I came across was a mediumship session with the theologian Martin Luther. And he was asked the question, and he had a brilliant answer. I won't say what it is right now, but a brilliant answer. And what he was asked was, why doesn't God basically get off his fat rear end and come down here and tell us what's going on? So here's the question to you, is the big question about ET. Why are they doing what they're doing? Why don't they just land and tell us what's going on?
I think it's twofold. I think firstly, there was some some considerations put in place where if they had to just come and show up, it would scare people, it would cause panic, it would, disrupt a lot of belief systems and thought processes, and people would probably just, go crazy with the chaos that it creates. So I think they wanted to avoid that. But I also think that they were allowing us to evolve on our own. If they had to just come here and give us all the secrets to life and to evolution in terms of spiritual consciousness, I think that we would kind of miss the point then. We need to go through this as humans. We need to experience our own journey as humans and understand what it is, because even there are other beings, there are other planets with other beings on it that are evolving just like we do. And so one day in the future, I don't know how many years, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of years, but in the future, we will be their ETs, we will be their UFOs in the sky that are, helping them evolve, perhaps. So it's just part of the process. We cannot skip ahead just because, we're tired of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. This is the fun of it, This is where the enjoyment is. This is what makes us human, that curiosity. What is this? How do I find out more? How do I connect with this? How do I use this to help myself and help others? Like, that is what makes us human. And I think we should appreciate that, and we should enjoy that more than just saying, hey, ETs, come on, land, take us for a ride. Let's go see the world, let's go see the universe, that kind of thing. I think there'll be a place and a time for that. And I don't think humans as a collective is ready for that right now. So I think we should just hold our horses and we should prepare ourselves, because it's going to come. We need to get ready,
I would like to add to that. I always use an analogy of climbing Mount Everest. What's the point of climbing Mount Everest? The climbing. You can get to the top of it with a helicopter. So would you feel proud if you said to your friends, hey, guess what? I made it to the top of Mount Everest. Oh my God, you climbed it? No, they dropped me off for 5 minutes. We had tea and biscuits and I flew back. All right. Come on. The whole point was the striving and the difficulty and the human effort and element and everything. And it's the same thing with schooling. I mean, hey, university, hey, Oxford, give me all the answers to the final test now, and then I don't have to come to school. I'll have all the answers and I'll get the great job. And no, it's Harry Chapin, the singer Harry Chapin from the 60s said, it's got to be the going, not the getting there, that's good. It has to be the on the way. And if you don't, that's why we need to, I'm starting to learn this, because believe me, I'm bad at it. I have terrible patience. I'm starting to learn this whole idea of having patience with what I do and what I create, that it doesn't necessarily mean you did it now, tomorrow you're successful, whatever that means. And I think the business world has a very, very deep effect on us, the stock market and everything, where we go, oh my God, he invested money and he made $1 million overnight. And it's like, and then you're wondering why you're working your job and why you're slugging it out and this and that. All things have a time to be released, like a time release capsule. A lot of times it would be the worst thing in the world for you to get what you want. A lot of times that's a nightmare to get what you want. You think you want it, then you get it and you're like, oh my God, why did that happen? How I ruined my life or whatever it is. So I do think it's a process, as Amira said. We have to live it. We have to get through it. And Grant, didn't you mention something I always remembered? You said some government official said something like, when it came to the ET topic, said something like, look, you just have curiosity.
Yeah.
You don't have a need to know.
Yeah, that was the highest level official that I think anybody's ever talked to. Dr. Eric Walker was the former president of Penn State University, and that's when he said, why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? Admit it, you're just curious. You just want to know that. And what are you going to do if the dog catches the car? When you figure it out, what are you going to do with it? And people really can't answer that question. And it's sort of like, is the government going to give it all up so Doug Auld can give the technology to his friends? No, they control it. But to sum this up, to show you how close all these paranormal phenomena are, here's the answer to what Martin Luther said, apparently in this seance in the 1950s or the 1850s. And this was, why doesn't God present himself? And he said, and I'm just paraphrasing him, because doubt is part of the equation. If the soul were to know all the answers, it would grow wings and fly away and leave the body behind. Right. God is the harvester and we are the sowers, and God is determined to keep the plow in the ground.
Wow. That's a great answer. I mean,
Yeah.
I think my Mount Everest could
Yeah, well, it's the
compete,
same. It's the thing.
but
It's the same.
no,
It's the
he's better.
it's the same idea. It's this idea that, we're in this Western idea where we want everything yesterday. It's all
Yeah,
about getting. It's not about learning. And when you
right.
start looking at the near-death experience and the reincarnation stuff, it's all about learning. It's not about getting anywhere. We've got forever to do it. We want everything solved today. We want, and even the idea of ETs, and we're sort of into, we've got everything. We've got the car. Our kids have been through university. Everything's going great, and we got the big house and stuff like that. And now we need some entertainment. We need some spiritual assurance that we're going to be just as well off after we die as we are now. And so that you see people just chasing stuff, and in terms of actually learning, they're indirectly learning. But
Yeah,
this is, I think, a sort of an explanation. You can see how all these things agree, that it's
Yeah.
about this the process rather than the end result, which is what we're all about in America and Canada, and probably in South Africa as well. Everybody wants to, let's get there,
Yeah.
let's get the education, because that'll give us the big thing. And then you see people who are suicidal, and they're,
yeah,
billionaires and millionaires, whatever, that they think
yeah.
I've arrived, and they haven't arrived.
Well, you
Yeah,
know,
I
you,
like that. And I agree with that. And I think, it comes down to perspective for me at least, because if you think about why do we chase things? Why are we always in a rush to do things and to get things? It's because we're gonna die. And then we believe that there's nothing beyond that. So when we take a step back and we look at the bigger picture and be like, well, if I do believe that I am eternal and that my experience will continue for all of eternity, then really there is no rush, whether it be ETs landing or whether it be, getting a degree from some type of university or whatever it may be. You don't find that need to push and to rush anymore because you realize that the experience will happen no matter what. Whatever it is, you need to learn from that thing. If you don't learn it here, you're going to learn it somewhere else. So it is what it is. It's just a perspective of timing, I guess.
I think also to add to that, Amira, is when in hearing this whole talk, it breaks down to the word fear. We're fearful. We are fearful. And like, so whether it's I'm not going to get enough, I'm not going to get my share, where is my love? Where is my attention? Where is my support? Where is my camaraderie? Where is my everything? I'm fearful. I'm fearful of all these variables. And so like I have to hoard, I have to get now. You see a lot of people when they walk into an event or a banquet or something, they run up and get everything onto their plate right away so that nothing's left for anybody else. It's like if they really knew the food was going to come out all day and wasn't going to be any different, and they were always going to be bringing out the sushi, the salmon, and this and that, maybe you wouldn't be so fearful. So I think we're all driven by fear. I know I am. I know I've gotten very, very deep touch with myself about my journey and realized that it's a lack. It's a lack of having that puts fear into us, and which now translates over into lack of faith in God, and that you're being guided, and that there's a reason why this happens the way it happens. So
I
Yeah.
resonate with that. I actually feel lately I've been having a lot of conversations with myself about fear and my own fears because it's a strange thing. We can go through something so many times and come out healthy and whole on the other side, but if we're faced with that same situation again, the fear comes up again. And so I had to have a conversation with myself about this fear thing. Like, where is it coming from really? Can we finally nip it in the bud? Because it gets annoying after a point. Like, I need to keep going. I need to do my thing. But there's this thought at the back of my mind about fear. And I think that is very much the same with the beings, because a lot of people don't know about it because they're fearful about it. So when I spoke to my brother the other day, it was a while ago, I was visiting my parents and I saw my brother. And he said, oh, what are you working on? And I told him, oh, it's this book about the beings and there's people talking about aliens and all these things. And he's like, oh, aliens don't exist. And I said, they do. And he said, they don't. And I said, they do. And we were having this kitty, fight, this, yes, they do. And he's like, no, they don't. And back and forth. And eventually he said, well, if they did exist, they would all just blow us up anyway. So I said, well, why do you think that? And I realized that his conditioning, and his belief system is telling him that aliens equal bad, aliens equal something to be afraid of. And I think a lot of people have that fear, whether it be conscious or unconscious, from whatever they've been fed and whatever they've consumed in terms of information over time. And so maybe that's part of the reason why, ETs don't just land, because they know that a majority of the population hold that fear vibration, and it will eventually burst out of them. So if we can learn to deal with our own limiting beliefs and our own fears for small things in our own lives, then we can deal with fear on a bigger scale. Like, what happens when I die? And, what if I have a bad experience after death? And what if there's an alien being that is not very good for me, or whatever? Those are big fears. So in order to deal with them, we need to practice dealing with the small fears in our everyday lives.
Let me add one thing to that. I'm actually maybe going to do a podcast today or tomorrow, just talking about Jim Semivan again. I listen to this guy because he's had the briefings and stuff like that. And he talks about his experience with the beings in 1992, and he's still upset. He said, I'm still angry. I don't know why they did this to me. And it's like, and the question is, who's the I that's asking the question? And it's the ego. The ego feels offended. I'm being attacked here. I'm a victim and stuff like that. And if you look at his experience, he's the guy that's behind the whole disclosure movement now. He's the guy, he had this experience. And then he went to the government and he said, you guys can't get this out. We're going to drop this thing. And he went with Tom DeLonge and they put the New York Times article, and then everything took off. And that was not like a 1 yard running play in football. That was like a 60-yard pass, moving the football down the field. That was the biggest event that ever happened in the UFO world ever. And the whole thing is, it would never have happened if those beings had not come into Jim Semivan's room and rang his bell and scared the living daylights out of him. That's what made it go. That's the whole thing. They're motivating us to do it. And it's almost like this, if you've ever seen this image of the person on the roller coaster, the little kid is on the roller coaster and his hair is standing up and he's terrified, and his spirit guide is sitting beside him, just going, Yahoo! So it's the thing is, like, your small self, the ego, is scared, and the higher self knows the ultimate purpose of this and says, this is so exciting. This, or almost like Jill Bolte Taylor, who had the she's a neuroanatomist who had a left brain hemorrhage where her ego got shut down, and the left brain would come online and then it would go offline. It would come online and it said, you got to do something. We're in trouble here. Where you got to do something. And then she'd go into the right brain, the female right brain. And then the right brain is saying, this is so cool. How many neuroanatomists can actually watch themselves having a stroke? This is so cool. And then the left brain would come back on. You got to do something. We're in trouble here. Do something. It's this thing about the question. I always said, this question comes down to who's the I that's asking the question. And what you see is the left brain is this fear side. It's there to keep us alive, and everything's an enemy, and we got to have a gun to shoot everybody, and everybody's a bad guy, and all this kind of stuff. And we got to go back to almost like the New Age literature is the idea. Remember who you actually are. You are not the puppet on the stage. You are the upper, and you're just playing this role. And so I appreciate that you two both see this idea that we're here to do stuff, and you feel good when you actually do something, and you think that you're moving the ball down the field, or you're advancing, and it's all about climbing Mount Everest, or however you want to describe it.
And let me add to that, Grant. There's no sonority to accomplishment. From the person who invents some amazing thing that changes the world to the person who cleans up the garbage in the street. That's an accomplishment, and that's a place and a purpose. And we have an egotistical look at who's a loser and who's a winner. We have a lot of winner loser stuff in our world. Oh, what a loser, what a winner. He did this, he did that. But there are smaller tasks that need to be done that are monumental. And if they're not done and they're not taken care of, they spill over and end up ending everything for everybody else around them. So it's not a matter of taking this kind of like, oh, well, I don't know what my purpose is. I'm just a nobody. A lot of people feel that. A lot of people feel they don't have a purpose, or that they don't have a calling. But a lot of times they have a calling, they just push it out. They don't want to know that that's my calling. They want to be the quarterback. They want to run the full, length of the football field, or they want to be the guy to skip that scores the goal in the hockey game. So it's like we have a problem with that, and I think that's important for people to remember, is that there's no place on the pecking order according to God about what you've accomplished. You just go out there and you accomplish things.
Yeah, everybody's at their level. That's where I was mentioning this thing where Chris Peters, Barbra Streisand's stepson, said they come to you and they'll deal with you at whatever level you're at. And the idea is, if you've got fear in your brain, they're going to use fear to teach you a lesson. And that's how it works. Is everybody's at whatever their level, learning whatever they're learning, and everybody thinks like a cell in the human body. And you realize that every cell does exactly what it's supposed to do, and that one single cell that decides it's going to be separate and not play the game can start duplicating, and it can take out all 85 trillion other cells just by one cell not doing what it's supposed to do. Or like you and I are into sports, and it's the whole idea. The worst thing you want in your dressing room is some guy who's a first round draft pick who thinks he doesn't need to do what he's told to do, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And that's the worst thing you can have in a dressing room. It'll kill any team. A team that's all working together with a bunch of schmucks who are just hardworking players will outdo the prima donna teams anytime.
Yeah, absolutely true. Yeah, fascinating. All right.
Yeah. So these life lessons that we're learning, we're putting out, and we're doing our little role, whatever it is, to do it. And I'm just glad. I mean, I don't know. You probably feel the same way. Is that you got to play the game. I mean, if you realize what's actually going on, you realize that this is a significant story, and that we actually got to play the game. Most people have no clue what's going on, and they're living lives of quiet desperation, trying to pay their bills and their mortgages and stuff like that. And we got to actually play the game.
That's very, very true. I feel honored, and a lot of times I've lost that vision, but I feel honored to live the life I've lived, and that I am living because of all the things that I've gotten involved in. And I would never have known, I think I mentioned this, Samira, in the book, my chapter, I would have never known that when I was in Catholic grammar school, feeling like a clown because I wasn't a very good reader, I was dyslexic. And I was like having a hard time reading and keeping up with the class. And so I adopted the calling of sky watching and daydreaming, looking out the window. And that's what kept me occupied. And I think, believe it or not, as early as I can go back into my life, I started to form a direction of being a loner, being on my own, getting involved in tinkering, inventing things, going down to the golf course and the pond and catching turtles and frogs, all these little activities by myself. I think probably, and I don't think I realized it at the time, I think probably because I just didn't feel adequate up to the kids that were doing better in school. They all went to colleges and they can't change a flat tire. And I went ahead and did what I did. So, it's very interesting how the thing that you think is your deficit could end up being your great asset later on.
Yeah. And it's funny because for me it was the same. My background is in teaching. I studied and I taught maths and science to high school for a long time. And before that I studied BCom and I was working in accounts and I hated it. And then, when my grandfather died and I started studying about near-death experiences and spiritual topics, I was ghostwriting about it. And for the longest time, I wondered to myself, why am I ghostwriting? Why don't I just write what I think and put my name on the book? Why do I have to ghostwrite? And it's because I felt that inadequacy. I felt like, well, I don't know enough about this thing. I am not an expert. I never had the experience. So I'm going to hide behind someone else's name and, let them have the name and let them have the accolades. And I'll just, be in the background. But over time, that kind of faded away. And it's like, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I'm not here to convince or convert anyone to anything anyway. I just want to share my experiences and I just want to share my perspective on it. Because like you were saying, everyone has a purpose and a role, no matter how small or big it is. If you look at all of us like flowers in a garden, you don't see the roses telling the sunflowers that, hey, I'm better than you because I'm a rose, and you are less than me because you're a sunflower. That's not the case. So why do we do that as humans? And I think we need to look at ourselves and be like, I am part of the whole, and it doesn't matter what my role is or how big my role is, it's still there, and it's still important to be there, or else the whole wouldn't be whole. It would be a whole minus you, which is
Right.
not a whole. So that's how I feel. And I feel like people who are looking for, what is my purpose, what is my calling, I think you already know what it is. Maybe just let go of the fear and just do it anyway. You anyway gonna die, it's not gonna matter, just do it and be happy with yourself.
It's good.
Beautiful, beautifully said. And remember that you have multiple lives, so it's not like you have to win this time. You've got it's all about the experience. It's about going through time after time after time. Because the other thing I bring up that people sort of got a little bit, some people laugh and some people get upset, is this idea about getting off the karmic wheel, that we've got to get this and we got to get off this karmic wheel. And I said, basically, that's like dressing up in a woman's dress, sneaking onto the lifeboat of the Titanic, and as you sail away, waving at the Titanic as it goes down. It's like nobody's saved until everybody's saved, and so everybody's doing their little part, and we know that all you need is, like, Doug and I know, you can have one player in a game, whether it's hockey or football, doesn't do what they're supposed to do, doesn't pick up a check, doesn't block when they're supposed to block, and the game is over. They will lose the game because one person made one bad play. And that it's all doing the best you can with what you've got, and assuming that you have some sort of role, and that you enjoy it, because you will enjoy when you actually believe that you've done something during the day.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the book. When's the book coming out? And talk maybe a little bit about how many authors we got in the book, and let's go through that.
Yeah, so the book is currently on Amazon on a pre-order, and the official book will be released on August 21st. So then you'll be able to purchase the hardcover and the paperback on Amazon as well on August 21st. And people can purchase it at theneardeathinstitute.com/The Beings Book. And I'll send you a link so you can just put it in the description so it's easy for people to find. And yeah, so we have 16 authors, with myself included. I did the introduction, and thank you again so much for doing the forward. I appreciate it so much. And when I was reading it, it was funny because I was reading it and I was like, this is perfect. There's nothing I would change. And so yeah, again, thank you so much, because it really encompasses everything that it is about, all the intentions of the book, and what we want to do moving forward. And I think that it's going to be a big step forward in terms of how people perceive these type of beings and these type of energies and entities. I think a lot of the fear will be released. I think a lot of people will be more open to their own experiences that they're currently having, that they may be suppressing. And I think people will be more open to learning about this and understanding it with fresh eyes, which is the best that we could ask for.
Beautiful. And you've done other books. Let's maybe get into that. You got the Near Death Experience Institute. So have you done books on near death experience, and what's coming next in terms of the next book?
Yeah, so we've done a book called Death, and that was released on March this year. And that also features, I think, 15 authors who've had near-death experiences, and they each also wrote a chapter on their experiences. And the next book coming out is The Ways to God, and that is going to be a compilation of multiple and diverse perspectives on what people believe is God and how they came to that understanding through their own spiritual journeys. And I hope with that book, the intention is to, again, give people a buffet of information and a buffet of options that they can then look at and say, well, I resonate with this and I don't resonate with that. And so they can make up their own minds. Because a lot of times when we come from, very strict religious upbringings, we tend to go in the complete opposite direction. I know that was true for me. So I grew up in a very strict religious background. And when I started questioning things and my teachers couldn't adequately give me answers that I was satisfied with, I eventually just said, well, I'll just become atheist and not believe in anything. But knowing full well that I do believe in something, because I was still seeing and experiencing amazing things, and I had to give credit to someone or something. And so I started learning about other religious understandings and other spiritual backgrounds and beliefs and paths. And then I came to find that there's a lot of things that resonate from multiple backgrounds and multiple paths. And so I wanted to give people a resource where they could also learn multiple perspectives from multiple backgrounds and people, so they can make their own decisions without being told what they need to believe, without being blamed or shamed into believing something, or without being kind of oppressed into believing something. They need to resonate with what they believe in, and it needs to come from a place of love. It needs to come from a place of acceptance and non-judgment, and that's what we want to do. I want this to be a completely non-judgmental, non-censored place where people can just freely express their beliefs, and others can either take on it or leave on it at their own discretion.
Beautiful. Doug, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I had a lot of thoughts about it, but one of the other reasons why I think the Beings book, me being a part of that, not the other one, is valuable is that I put photographs in that book. Others did too. I'm going to see them all once I see the book. But there are a lot of people that may witness similar things to me that don't know what to say about it, and then they read the book and they go, oh, wait a minute, there's this guy and he left his email and he's got his email address, he's got his website. Let me write him. I'm going to write him and show him the photograph that I have, and he's over here and halfway across the world and I'm over here, and we saw the same thing. So we start to compare notes. I did an interview recently, a UFO interview, where in the book I have a picture of what I call the manta UFO. The manta, it's got like these two little sticks coming out of the front of it, and it looks like a manta ray. And I shared it with somebody, and he said, oh my God, I've seen that manta ray. I saw that manta image also. Now, I've never seen it before. It's some element of UFO. Perhaps it's government secret ship, or it's ET. And that's the other thing I wanted to mention, is whether it's an ET ship, an extraterrestrial ship, something outside of our world, or whether it is of our world, meaning high-tech government secret stuff, it's just as important, because that means we have something like that and we've never seen it before. And what can it do? And is it anti-gravity? And if it is anti-gravity, that means we have anti-gravity. If we have anti-gravity, how come that's not working its way into our lives? Why are we still struggling with this or that? So I think it answers a lot of things, be the real so-called out of our planetary realm, or be them part of our government's ships. They're all important to be seen and for people to share their information on.
Beautiful. Well said. Anything anybody wants to add, or should we drop it here? I'd like to do an interview sometime on the near-death experience book, because I've worked on that, of course, as probably everybody in the UFO community. In fact, in the UFO community, if you look at the Freeze survey, it said that 37% of all UFO experiencers have had a near-death experience. And that comes to this idea about mission, about synchronicity, is what's the chances that you got abducted and you also had a near-death experience? Like, what's the chances? Like, these aren't random events. It's almost like this idea, these are things to give us experience to learn lessons. So I'd love to do something on the near-death experience thing. And Doug, you could probably want to join in that as well, because we all go down that road and we realize there are these connections between the two.
Grant, I just want to thank you again for being part of this and for doing the forward of the book. Amira, I'm not sure if I ever explained to you that Grant's UFO experience, called Charlie Red Star, which was like a riveting thing for me to read, was just such a solid occurrence with witnesses and everybody for a period of time in Grant's life, that was one of the events that I read that I became very impressed with, to say that this cannot be fabricated. This is just too real. And what is the explanation to this? So, Grant, I want to thank you for knowing you all these years, and we've been having a good time.
Yeah, we've got other interests as well that with people we follow, and I think we're all on the same search, is trying to figure out what's really going on and what's important. And it's always been a thrill to know somebody who's as good at art as you are. I always bug you on the internet is like, can you quit posting these photographs and claiming you painted this stuff? So people, we've done, maybe we can link some of these interviews that you and I have done on your musical talents and your artistic talents and stuff. So it's been a thrill. That's the whole thing about this whole experience is you feel so honored. Like sometimes, you know, my ex-wife would say, "You got no friends." It's like, seriously? I can go to any country in the world. I know somebody. I don't have any friends here, maybe, because nobody's really interested. It's like the old idea: you're never a prophet in your own land. It's like people don't really they don't care. But when you go outside, people all sort of you know people all over the place, and everybody's on the same page. And you I don't know if you've been to conferences, Amira, where you go and what you see is these contact events. In fact, I've got one that's going to be on this ship. I'm on this ship thing, this cruise to Alaska, and I got one. They gave me one event the first morning, which ain't going to work, and it's a contact event. So usually in conferences, what you get is the people who are really close are the lectures start at 9:30 in the morning, but at 8 o'clock in the morning, all the experiencers get together and they sit in this room and they're all upset. It's like, nobody cares about us. We're in this little back room here. And they just care about the speakers. And it's true. Nobody cares about them. And they're there so nobody can really see who they are. They're out there by 9 o'clock before the lectures begin or whatever. And that's, to me, is when you see those people and you're in those rooms and there's people crying and they go to an event on the other side of the country because the contact event, they're not interested in the speakers. They're just interested in their friends that they know that have had the same experience, because they can't talk with their friend and their relatives about this experience. They have to find this like a support group. So that's what this book will be as well, is like a support event for people who've had the experience, and they read the story and they go, oh, that happened to me too. And it gives them validation. And because a lot of people in the experiencer world feel totally ostracized, and they are being ostracized. If you look at the major UFO documentaries, they will not touch experiencers, and they've been confronted, and they say we can't go there. We're scientific. We just need nuts and bolts. We need, sightings, and they'll say that's anecdotal, whereas everything's anecdotal in UFOs. Just because you're a fighter pilot can drop bombs on people, that means your story is more valid than somebody who's in Winnipeg or in South Africa or New York. No. So I think this is a great service to people, and it's just this little putting our little piece of the puzzle in there, and one person may read it and it'll change their life, and that's all that counts.
Yeah.
100%, 100%. I couldn't have said it better. And another thing I love that you said is that what I'm so proud of the work that we do specifically at the Near Death Institute is that we do not censor people. You mentioned earlier about people who wanted to do books, but then the publisher would say, no, we need to pull this needs to be removed, this needs to come out. And I don't do that. And Doug can attest, for even our editors that work on the book, they will not touch your content. They will only make sure that it is, like grammarly, in terms of grammar, is it correct, in terms of spelling and that type of thing. But they will not touch your content, because when you change the content of what someone has written, what they've shared in their message, you're changing the vibration of it. You're changing the intention of it. And that is not what we do. We don't censor people. We want them to express themselves freely and openly. And this is a safe space for them to do that without judgment. So I'm very happy about that. And thank you again so much. I really appreciate you, both of you.
Yeah, and in the end, they'll all be right, because you look back on all these events, and it was like when I started in 1975, if you saw a UFO, you were crazy. If you claimed you saw 2 UFOs, nobody would even talk to you. Forget it. And now that's all changed. Now we know this stuff happens. So it's just a matter of time, and the stories will all be validated in the end. People may misinterpret what they're seeing. There's nobody making very few people making up stories in terms of what they're seeing, and it's all being done for a reason. And in the end, it'll all become valid. And as I say, it's like the secular UFO researchers and secular scientists are going to be people fighting over the cyanide pills, because this is going to be much more spiritual, much less physical than people think. and it's going to be 1,000 times more complex than what people think. And people like you two and myself and the people in the book are the people that are telling the story. It's like 500 years ago, 500 years from now, people are going to be saying, "Oh, those people are so lucky. It was like they lived at the time of Jesus." And it's like, we are at that time. We're the ones that are putting this story out, and eventually people will catch up. So it's a very important role. And thank you too for what you've done to move the ball down the field, because that's what it's basically about. Is we're all pitching in, and we're in the movie theater, and we want to make it exciting, so God doesn't take his popcorn and go into the next theater and just tell the story. And in the end, I think it's all gonna work out, and people are gonna realize these people were right all along.
On the last note, and I'll leave it alone. As you know, Grant, I did a whole series of paintings on whistleblowers.
Yeah.
And many of my 100 portraits of whistleblowers, being ufology, deep state stuff, pharmaceuticals, you name it, people who blew the whistle. And a lot of them are no longer with us. A lot of them suffered, and a lot of them went through ridicule, scrutiny of stuff that we don't understand. And so when people find my website, which is just my name, DougAuld.com, you'll see all the whistleblower portraits that I put in there of amazing people throughout the years that you and I know, Grant and Amira. We all should thank them too.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody's playing their little role. To me, it's always like the idea that you got to see yourself as a cell in the body. Everything's alive, everything's conscious, everything is connected. And you have your little role to play, and play it the best you can. Almost like in sports. If you're playing your thing, you don't worry about if you're a defenseman, you're a defenseman. You don't worry about scoring the goals. You just do your job to keep people out from in front of the net and stuff like that. And you do your job the best you can. And if everybody does that, we win.
Yep. Good stuff.
Beautiful. Thank you. And let's maybe arrange something for near-death experiences. I'd like to go down that road. And when your next book comes out, I'll help you, because I have some people I think might be interested in your next book. And
thank you.
We'll go from there, and we'll continue to push the issue and do, I guess, what we're supposed to do, or what makes us happy, or whatever, however you want to see the thing. But thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, Grant. Thank you.